I'm Dr. Andrew Brandeis. Welcome to part 3, step 3 of the intestinal repair protocol. So step 3 is discussing dietary and lifestyle modifications. So I've boiled this down to a few very simple steps, and these are very important steps to follow. The first step is reducing grains in your diet. So you may have heard of the Paleolithic diet or even the Atkins diet. There's all kinds of diets out there that encourage reduction of carbohydrates. This isn't a weight loss program, so I'm not so concerned about reduction of carbohydrates, but I am concerned about reduction of grains, and I'll tell you why. Let's think for a second about gas and bloating. So these are a byproduct of yeast or bacterial fermentation of carbohydrates, right? So if you're gassy, something is fermenting your food before you're absorbing it. We've already discussed how important it is to, say, chewing your food, eating slowly, increasing hydrochloric acid, decreasing water consumption with meals. All of these steps are so that food is absorbed instead of fermented. Now, yeast is a natural flora in the gut, meaning that there's supposed to be a little bit of yeast in the gut, but various factors can cause this yeast to overgrow. And if that's the case, and then you add a whole bunch of sugar to a bunch of yeast that shouldn't be there, you'll absolutely get fermentation. But now, this is maybe not as straightforward as you'd think. So for a second, I want to discuss drinking a Coke versus eating brown rice. So if you drink a Coke, that sugar is going to very quickly make it into your body. So via the stomach and intestines, it will get absorbed, and that sugar is going to hit the bloodstream very quickly. The sugar in a Coke isn't going to linger in the intestines and get fermented by yeast or bacteria. However, complex carbohydrates, which are really just strings of sugar that your body has to break down into sugar to absorb, those things are going to linger and hang around in the intestines. And if you have a bunch of sugar hanging around in the intestines, then you'll likely experience fermentation of those sugars. So in this example, I like to say that Coke is better for you than brown rice. Now, I'm definitely not advocating replacing grains with Coca-Cola, but I want to make that point that reducing and eliminating grains is the first step, the first dietary and lifestyle modification step to restoring health, because it takes away the fuel for the unwanted yeast and bacteria that we're trying to get rid of. So this isn't as difficult as it sounds, and it's incredibly beneficial. So you can replace grains with any number of foods. For example, you can use, instead of tortillas, you can use something like collard greens. You can cook a sweet potato or a yam instead of rice. You might find that you don't get as full as quickly when you start taking grains out of your diets, because grains fill you up so quickly, but that's fine. This diet isn't about reducing calorie consumption. It's about removing the wrong calories and eating the right ones. So I'm okay if you want to eat as many leafy green vegetables as possible, ripe fruit, even as much meat as you want. And let's just take for a second talk about fruit. The riper the fruit, the better, because that sugar that's in there is going to get into your bloodstream quicker and out of the intestines, and not linger and hang around the intestines waiting to be fermented. Reducing grains typically means that vegetarianism isn't an option. I've been a vegetarian at various points in my life. I don't love the idea of eating meat, especially when we know it's factory farmed, and I certainly respect that choice. But I've never successfully treated a vegetarian who had impaired intestinal function. So if reducing grains, if you're a vegetarian, reducing grains might severely limit the options available to you. I want you to consider strongly, just for 3 months, switching to a more Paleolithic diet where you reduce grains and consume foods like bone broth or chicken or fish, so that you could still be nourished without putting the wrong foods in your body that are specifically wrong for your gut. After 3 or 6 months, if you want to return to vegetarianism, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Step 2 of diet and lifestyle modification is eating cooked foods only. Some people have approached me and asked about, raw food diets. They think raw food has a ton of nutrients that are available, and everybody, a lot of people, they want to do everything they can, and they think that eating raw food diets are health promoting, which could be true if you have intact digestion. But it takes a lot of energy to digest and absorb the nutrients in raw food. So if you have impaired function, you're going to have a difficult time digesting and absorbing raw food. So think of it this way. You always want to start with your food as pre-digested as possible. That means cooked and blended foods, such as soups, are the best for you. After your gut is healed and you can digest food properly, then you can reintroduce raw foods, and you'll find that you likely won't get gassy and bloated, and you can digest them quite well. The reason I put a picture of sushi here is because sushi is sort of a special case of raw food that should sort of be avoided at all times. Traditionally, the use of soy sauce and wasabi, fermented soy sauce and wasabi with sushi was more for health reasons than for taste. So soy sauce is high in salt, which we know is a natural preservative. It's a sterilization agent, and it's fermented, which means it'll likely have good bacteria in it. So if you're eating raw fish that could have bad bacteria or pathogenic bacteria or parasites, dousing that in salt could kill the parasites that are present on the surface of the sushi. Additionally, wasabi, it's a spice that was traditionally used to kill parasites that might have been present in food, and even though today we still use soy sauce and wasabi with sushi, it's interesting to know where that came from. But even sushi grade fish that you're getting in a high quality sushi restaurant can still have microscopic parasites on it that can infect humans. And in a normally functioning, healthy digestive system with plenty of hydrochloric acid and plenty of secretory immunoglobulin A, those parasites, that's not a problem. They don't take hold because the local immune system is able to fight those infections. But if you have impaired gut function, raw sushi can have parasites and prove hazardous to the progress that you're trying to make, and should really be avoided not only during the 3 to 6 months that you're on the protocol, but you may want to consider avoiding sushi permanently. And I know that's probably depressing for some people to hear. It's depressing for me to say, but it actually is one of those simple long-term lifestyle modifications that you can make that will prevent recurring infections. So step 3, I alluded to it a little bit with talking about soy sauce before, but step 3 is adding fermented foods to your diet. So as we discussed, your intestines are lined with beneficial bacteria that outnumber our human cells 10 to 1. And fermented foods are so high in this beneficial bacteria that populate your gut and that defend you from infections, digest and assimilate your food. The reason for that is because for millions of years, we've been eating food with bacteria on it. Fermentation was the first form of preserving foods before we had refrigeration. Fermentation would prevent foods from rotting, and we sort of evolved with the bacteria that was on these foods, and they inoculated our intestines and our skin. Unfortunately, today, our food is sterilized and pasteurized so that there's no bad bacteria living on it, but that also means that there's no good bacteria living on it. So what I want you to do is add fermented foods to your diet so that you can continually inoculate your intestines with good bacteria. So fermented foods can include, sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kombucha, and this is something you can easily obtain at pretty much any grocery store across the United States and Europe. And we need a constant supply of fresh, healthy, and local beneficial bacteria from our outside environment to populate our inside environment. So what I mean by local bacteria is that if you're exposed to local pathogens, local bacteria or parasites that shouldn't be there, you should have the local good guys inoculating your intestines to fight potential infections for you, which is why it's great to eat fermented foods that come from relatively close to your house and not from across the country. So that was step 3 of the treatment approach for the intestinal repair protocol, diet and lifestyle modifications. As you can see, those were 3 very easy to follow steps that I hope you'll incorporate into your new healthy lifestyle.